This has been a long project in the making, and I just want to thank everyone for the collaboration that went into this, a true collaboration. Rebecca and Anna and Lee and Denise and all of Lacenell's incredible music. Thank you, Joseph and Demi and Pete. Thank you to Michael Batt, our tech director, and to Julia Lee.
Thank you, Michael.
Agencies for videoing. Thanks to Ryan Clark and Abigail and all the student volunteers, and Miss Linda for the amazing food. As you can see, we're all up here doing our thing, and I'll close out doing my thing, and then Lacenell will actually close it out. A little nervous, so you're going to close it out. But I'm going to first do a little thing of mine. Within 60 miles of where we sit, there are over 160 refineries and petrochemical plants up and down the Mississippi River. DuPont, Dow, Kinder Morgan, Monsanto, Shintech of Japan, Sasol of South Africa, Shandong Yuan of China, Formosa of Taiwan, BASF of Germany, SNF of France, Nutrien of Canada. Louisiana is home to 25% of the petrochemical production in the U.S. Every major oil and gas producer, the largest distributors of styrofoam and sulfur. They emit more pollution than 99.6% of industrialized areas in the country, causing massive increases in asthma, miscarriages, DNA mutation, and cancer, all in the name of production and profit. Scholars and activists call these high concentration areas sacrifice zones. This one has two other names, Death Alley and Plantation Row. In colonial and antebellum times, direct access to the river meant greater productivity and profit for enslavers. These graphics from a forensic architecture study connect past and present plantation logics in the management of death. They expand the definition of the sacrifice zone historically, and I'm going to do the same geographically, structurally, racially, and culturally to ask how people manage to live in the face of such sacrifice and what role music might play in their ways of living. Geographically, the borders of the zone are porous because the downstream effects of emissions are uncontainable, heating the planet and increasing the number and intensity of hurricanes and other hazards. Structurally and racially, environmental disparity is part of an ensemble of inequalities that extends to education, the war on drugs, access to health care, and so on. The environmental crisis reveals the brute calculus by which the lives of some are sacrificed for the benefit of others, and actuarial violence, what Achille Mbembe calls necropolitics, that's an overriding logic of colonialism and capitalism. Finally, culturally, how should we evaluate invocations of music as a life-saving force within these literal and metaphorical environments that threaten lives? Hurricane Katrina laid bare the disposability of life for all to see. In the calamity, the state legislature met to dissolve the city's school system and form the nation's only 100% charter district. In the non-system that resulted, top-ranking schools today enroll 40% students of color, while second and third-tier schools are 95% or higher. An access gap to arts education opened up, and music classes were cut, creating both a need and an opportunity for independent nonprofits to fill the void. It was then that musician Derek Tabb approached me about starting a citywide after-school program for kids aged 9 to 14. The roots of music grew and ran uninterrupted until the pandemic, then closed again when our building was damaged by Hurricane Ida a year ago, finally resettling by Mardi Gras this year. So we see how environmental crises, a public health emergency, and educational restructuring have had a determining effect on the openings and closures, operations and inoperations of this little engine that could. Derek Tabb has traveled the world and won a Grammy Award with the Rebirth Brass Band, and he credits his success to middle school band director Donald Richardson Jr. When Derek was 10 years old, a drug dealer approached him to deliver a package and he accepted, unwittingly stepping down a path that led friends and a family to a life of crime, or worse. But Derek chose to spend his after-school hours in the band room, where Richardson instilled discipline through the rudiments of drumming, double strokes, paradiddles, flams, rolls. He was strict, says Derek. He saved me. Among the hundreds of boys and girls I've seen grow into men and women, it's commonplace to hear stories like this, where taking up music is presented as a matter of life and death. I met trombonist LeBron Joseph the day Roots opened in 2008, at a perilous time in his life.
I was hanging with guys in the street, guys who was selling drugs, guys who was robbing people, my friends from the hood. And I realized, the police came down and stopped everybody, and one of my friends went to jail. But while he went to jail and all of that was going on, I was at band practice. And then somebody got shot, but I was at band practice. And I'm like, man, the only thing that's saving me from being a part of any of this stuff right here is me going to band practice. Mm-hmm. And if I wasn't at band practice, I could probably be in all of this.
Claims about the supernatural powers of music are routinely critiqued in music studies, but the pervasiveness of stories like LeBron's and like Derek's amount to something like a social fact that demand consideration. Soon after Hurricane Ida, I saw a boy named Khalil practicing trumpet a few doors down from Lee's apartment. When I walked up to say hi, he noticed I was wearing a Roots of Music shirt, and he told me he just enrolled there. His father, Herb, came out, and then his sister, Harlem, and that was the first of our neighborly chats about Roots, about how my daughter Ella went to their school, about how Herb and Ella stayed vegetarian around us meat eaters, about my middle name, Khalil, that I shared with Khalil, about how we all stayed through Ida and then evacuated when we realized the power would be out for weeks. Just everyday conversations in New Orleans. Visiting the Roots of Music, I'd see Khalil and Harlem learning popular songs with syncopated rhythms, funky tuba riffs, and loud strident horn parts paired with high-stepping drill routines. Band is Black excellence personified, and kids come to value their culture as an asset to be proud of, rather than a deficit requiring assimilation to white norms. Rehearsal culminates with Mardi Gras, parading down the wide boulevards in matching black and gold uniforms, perfectly in step, horns up, wowing the crowds pressed against the police barricades. These are images from the Bacchus Parade and the Roots of Music rehearsal taken by Abdul Aziz, who's working on a book with me as a photographer and also doing a video documentary of his own. He's also working here tonight. Aziz and I interviewed her before the parade. This is the father of Khalil and Harlem.
It gives you chills. It does. It does something to your soul. Music is powerful. To hear the bands playing, man, hearing them play songs that you hearing on the radio every day is awesome. It's awesome. It is.
Herb played trumpet as a student at Edna Carr High School on the West Bank, where he grew up in the housing projects, one of 15 kids. After graduation in 2002, he started working at an oil refinery because some of his older friends were making upwards of $100,000 a year. Herb is a welding inspector, entering the empty tanks to examine the pipes, and in his 30s he developed lymphoma. He undertook a chemotherapy regimen and went back to work, but the tumor in his chest returned 9 months later. So he received a very progressive and expensive stem cell transplant at one of the best cancer hospitals in the US, MD Anderson in Houston. Herb told me and Aziz that the refinery is willing to pay for the best insurance because they know the risks they put their employees through.
We would make good money with overtime. I mean, I felt after a while of getting ill, it's like the pay is more like a hazard pay. That's how I feel about it. You know, they pay you well because they know what it is. The owners, they're like off on an island somewhere, so they're nowhere near those refineries. Yeah, man, it's poison.
Just one more story from this time.
Some people, this one girl, she had the same cancer, but she had Medicaid, and MD Anderson rejected her, turned her away, wouldn't give her the procedure. So, is it about caring or is it about money? Because if you cared, you would have helped her. It's just plain as that.
I'll end with 3 cautionary notes. First, Herb's comments point to the limits of isolating environmental hazards from a barrage of other structural problems, like access to health care for those inside a sacrifice zone maintained by those outside, off on an island somewhere. But second, the borders of the sacrifice zone are porous, and those outside are not fully protected. Harms have disproportionate effects on certain lives, but ultimately no place or person is guaranteed safe. And third, in the face of such poisons, we can celebrate how music is called upon to nurture life, to provide hope and joy and maybe even a job. But it would be folly to suggest music is a magical antidote that counteracts structural violence and leave it at that. There are tragic stories of students at the roots of music who lost their lives. And there are hopeful stories of students who walked away from band and found tools for living in other areas. Halil and Harlan moved on from Roots, and Halil's now immersed in basketball, which is why the family isn't here tonight. While we should be careful not to dismiss claims of music's life-saving potential voiced by Derek, LeBron, and others, we should be just as careful not to endow music with exceptional status in confronting, overcoming, or providing shelter from life's perils. We can't say with any certainty what the world of music giveth into a world of sacrifice that taketh away. Thank you.